Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're embarking on a seriously fascinating journey into the architecture of the human mind. As researchers and educators, we're constantly circling around a question that honestly seems pretty simple on the surface, but is actually one of the absolute most profound mysteries in all of psychology. What exactly is learning, and why do we so desperately need theories to understand it? In this explainer, we're going to strip away all our basic assumptions and look at the hard science of how we actually acquire knowledge. So get ready, because we're diving deep into the frameworks that shape every single classroom, every training session, and pretty much every moment of discovery we ever experience.
To really grasp why this matters, let's just look at a scenario that plays out in universities literally everywhere. Imagine a super dedicated student. She's doing everything right. She attends every lecture, she studies diligently, she's constantly practicing the material, yet she consistently struggles to master the concepts. Now, sitting right next to her is another student. This second student receives the exact same lesson from the exact same professor, reads the exact same textbook, but grasps the material almost effortlessly. So here's the crucial question we have to ask. If both of these students received the exact same lesson, why in the world did they learn so differently? Why doesn't equal input equal output? This one single question completely shatters the illusion that learning is just this simple transfer of information from a teacher's mouth to a student's brain. It highlights the immense hidden complexity of what is actually happening beneath the surface.
To really solve this mystery, we first need to define our terms. Learning is officially defined as the complex process of acquiring new knowledge, skills, behaviors, and attitudes. It's an enduring change in behavior, or at least in the capacity to behave in a given fashion, which results from practice or experience. Notice that it's not just about cramming facts into your head for a test. It is a deeply multifaceted transformation. It actually involves how you act, how you think, and how you perceive the entire world around you. When we look a bit closer, we realize our struggling student isn't just dealing with a tricky textbook. She is navigating a massive web of invisible forces. Her learning is being actively shaped by her motivation levels, her prior knowledge of the subject, her unique cognitive abilities, her current emotional state, the physical environment of the classroom, her social interactions, and the reinforcement she receives. And here's the kicker. Every single one of these variables is interacting at the exact same time. When we look at all those variables bouncing off each other, honestly, it just looks like chaos. So we arrive at a massive central problem. If learning is so wildly complex and so heavily influenced by psychological, environmental, and biological factors all at once, how can psychologists possibly understand it scientifically? How do we move beyond just making random, isolated observations to actually grasping the mechanics of the mind?
Well, the answer is that we desperately need structured frameworks. At its core, a theory organizes all these different factors involved in learning into a coherent framework. We literally need these theories because human education is simply too complex to be understood through isolated observations alone. A well-articulated theory takes all that chaos, the messy emotions, the environment, the cognition, and binds it into a systematic structure that we can actually test, measure, and apply.
Let's break down exactly why these frameworks are so vital. First, they allow us to explain learning processes, taking incredibly complex mechanisms like how memory encodes data and breaking them into understandable, digestible components. Armed with that explanation, they then guide our educational practices, giving us a solid foundation to build way better instructional methods. And crucially, they allow us to predict outcomes. A robust theory lets educators anticipate challenges and know exactly how individuals are likely to react under specific conditions.
But theories do a lot more than just predict things. They help us address vast individual differences. Learners differ in age, experience, cultural background, and theories help us account for that beautiful diversity. They also give scientists a foundation to support ongoing research and innovation. Ultimately, they act as a bridge. They allowed instructional designers to take abstract, high-level scientific principles out of the lab and apply them directly to a living, breathing classroom. To study all this systematically, researchers use specific scientific variables. First, we have independent variables. These are the manipulated factors, like the specific teaching methods being used. Then we have intervening variables. These are the internal states of the learner, like their current level of motivation, their prior experience, or their attention span. Finally, we have the dependent variables, and these are the measurable outcomes, like the final test scores or the demonstrated learning outcomes.
Okay, let's bring this right back to our initial story of the struggling student. In her classroom reality, the teaching method the professor chooses is the independent variable. But before that teaching method becomes a final test score, which is the dependent variable, it absolutely must pass through the filter of her internal state. her personal motivation, her stress levels, her prior knowledge. These intervening variables interact with the teaching method to produce the final outcome. It's a precise scientific formula being applied directly to real human behavior.
Through empirical research of these variables, psychologists establish fundamental principles, or laws of learning. Two of the most famous ones actually come from Edward Thorndike. The law of effect basically states that behaviors followed by satisfying outcomes or rewards are strengthened and more likely to be repeated, while unpleasant outcomes diminish behavior. Contrast that with his law of exercise, which emphasizes that practice and repetition directly strengthen the learning association.
Now, these aren't just dusty old historical footnotes. They are highly practical tools used every single day. To help our struggling student cross the finish line, a knowledgeable teacher can intervene using these exact laws. The teacher applies the law of effect by offering specific praise and positive reinforcement when the student grasps a small concept, making her want to repeat that success. Simultaneously, the teacher applies the law of exercise by designing guided, repetitive practice sessions to physically strengthen those neural pathways and behavioral associations.
Now, as logical and clean as that sounds, applying pure science to human beings is, well, it's messy. Researchers constantly grapple with massive ongoing challenges. They have to account for the sheer diversity among learners and the endless debate of nature versus nurture. On top of that, accurately measuring learning is incredibly difficult, and conducting human research comes with strict, necessary ethical boundaries. Even today, we face the major interdisciplinary challenge of adapting these older foundational theories to modern, highly digital learning environments.
Because of these complex challenges, perfectly standardizing education is almost impossible. Every single student walks into a room with their own unique baseline, what we call the determinants of learning. This is their prior knowledge, their cognitive abilities, the social environment they come from. It even comes down to their emotional readiness to learn on that specific day. Think about it. You could have the highest quality instruction in the world, but if a student is emotionally distressed, that learning simply won't transfer.
So, why do we go through the immense trouble of this complex research? Because its practical applications literally transform lives. By understanding these scientific theories, we can design highly effective teaching methods. We can create personalized learning paths that cater directly to a student's unique intervening variables. And most importantly, it gives us the tools to identify learning difficulties early, ensuring that struggling students, exactly like the one in our story, never fall through the cracks.
We've covered a ton of ground today. We started with the chaotic, complex reality of two different students experiencing the exact same lesson, and we've successfully mapped out exactly why structured scientific learning theories are absolutely essential. We need them to organize the chaos, to predict outcomes, to understand variables, and to build practical, effective educational frameworks that actually serve everyone. We now know why psychologists needed theories of learning.
But as we look ahead, the next question we have to ask is even more interesting. We just talked about Thorndike's law of exercise, right? Learning through practice and repetition. But what happens when a person suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, discovers the solution to a complex problem? Not through trial and error, not through endless repetition, but through a sudden, brilliant flash of insight? How does the mind instantly organize chaos into absolute clarity?
That phenomenon totally flips everything we just talked about completely on its head. In our next explainer, we're going to explore exactly how that happens. Join us next time as we dive into Gestalt theory and the fascinating world of learning through insight. Until then, keep questioning, keep analyzing, and keep learning. See you in the next explainer.